everybody. I hope everyone can hear me coming through nice and clear. And welcome to session 2 of the VTHC OHS Basic Series. My name is Dominic and I work at the OHS team here at the Hall. And the OHS team would like to thank our sponsors at Slater & Gordon for their ongoing support for these type of events. I also wish to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land on which VTHC stands, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today, we're going to be talking about giving workers a voice. We are joined by Dr. Gerry Ayers, who works as the OHS and E manager at the CFMEU. Gerry has worked in the construction industry for over 35 years. He has a PhD in OHS, a master's degree in OHS, a graduate diploma in occupational hazard management, and an associate diploma in OHS. His thesis for his PhD focused specifically on consultation and organisational maturity in the Victorian construction industry, and he's written many articles and presented papers both locally and internationally on a vast range of OHS issues. So we're very lucky to have him here today. Before we begin, and I hand over to Gerry, just some housekeeping. If anyone has any questions, please place them in the chat and we'll come to the questions at the end. This session is being recorded and we will upload it to our website at a later date. Please note, however, that we're just recording the presentation session. We'll not be recording the question and answer session afterwards. So feel free to ask frank and fearless questions in that session. Fantastic. Look, with that, we'll get started. I'm going to start by asking Gerry a few questions. And the first is, Gerry, why did you decide to do your PhD on consultation specifically?
Mainly because I've always thought that consultation is a very empowering thing to do because it can pass on knowledge, it gives something to someone else, and it can actually make a real difference to people's lives and their circumstances. And it's also a very democratic thing to do. When you think about it, we do it every day of the week. We consult and negotiate with our family, whether over dinner or where we're going to go for holidays. We do it in our local social clubs or sporting clubs or whatever it is. And we should do it at work. And it's interesting because at the workplace, people don't always get a say in how they do the work, and they don't find out what's going on. They don't find out as much as they should or as they need to. Mm-hmm. And I think consultation, given a very high profile in the OHS Act and our own WorkSafe, our own OHS regulator put a very high profile and high emphasis on it. But unfortunately, and my PhD was titled Meaningful and Effective Consultation, mm-hmm. we don't always do it at the workplace as well as we should, and some places don't even do it at all.
Fantastic. Well, let's focus on that for a second. Then you said that your PhD thesis title was Meaningful and Effective. So what does good consultation look like in the context of a workplace?
I think the first thing is giving workers a voice, giving them the opportunity to actually have a say over whatever the issue is that it's being consulted about, but give them that opportunity before a decision is made. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the time there's a bit of a mismatch where some employers are often communicating a decision which has already been made or indeed preordained before they do the consultation to get in employees' view. So good consultation, and there's a definition under the Act, but basically it's giving people the opportunity to have a say on whatever issue is being up for negotiation or being consulted on, taking those workers' viewpoints into consideration, mm-hmm. and then looking at can they accommodate the needs and wants of workers equally as much as the needs and wants of the employer. There's also a thing which is often missing, I think, in consultation is giving feedback to those people who are consulted and who are giving their ideas and their opinions and their thoughts, giving them feedback about why perhaps their viewpoints couldn't be considered or why they weren't included in whatever the eventual outcome is over the issue which is being consulted on.
You say that's an additional and probably often missed one. Why do you think that's an important step as well?
I think it takes time to do the consultation. And, you know, in this day and age, everyone's struggling for time. And speaking from the construction industry side of things, you know, our buildings are built on a really tight time frame. And so often a lot of employers don't build into their program the time that it takes to consult with workers and the time it will take to consult with the OHS reps, which is a mandatory requirement. We can get into that a little later on. And I just think it's overlooked. I mean, when you think about a lot of people, a lot of individuals, we all have to pay our bills. We all have to put food on the table. We all have to make decisions every day about what's important. You know, some people are not just paying rent, they're not just paying a mortgage, they'll have all these other bills and financial things they have to get through, what schools to send their kids to and all this. Most people, the majority of people are really very intelligent. Now, when they go to work, they're not always given that opportunity. And I think it's a little bit patronising from the employer's point of view. You think, well, you don't need to know what's going on. Leave it to me and I'll make sure that everything's done correctly. And I think there's a failure there to acknowledge, A, the intelligence of workers, firstly, B, the contribution that they can make to the workplace in both safety-wise but also productivity-wise. And I think the third point is that they just... I think a lot of employers just forget how important the workforce is. You know, there's always that rhetoric about our workforce is our number one priority. If that's the case, there should be so much more consultation and discussion with workers about how to do the work in the best and safest way to do the work. And unfortunately, that doesn't occur as often as it should.
Sure. I think let's take that point then. I think you say that this is the ideal situation, get people talking, employers are open to what employees are saying and trying to take that on board in the way that they design the work. But, you know, that sounds perhaps a bit idealistic as well. It sounds great, but this is a real shake-up for a lot of people in terms of workplace, the power dynamics in their workplace.
It gets back to what I called in my PhD, a lot more power sharing. And that's a scary thought for some people. I think some employers still would love to get back to the master servant role. You know, you do what I say, don't question my decision. But to me, consultation is not about taking away the right of management to manage. It's about holding them accountable to the decisions that they make when they are managing the workplace. It's making them accountable and responsible, but it's also pointing out perhaps there's a better way to do the job or the work than what's been suggested. And I think that's sometimes, again, a failure to be missed. I remember when I first started off when I was a young builder's labourer, and we had this lovely elderly Italian labourer who was sort of showing me the ropes. And he was raised back in Italy, and in those days, he was telling me that they did everything from digging the ditches to wiring the houses. So they did the whole bricklaying, the foundations, the framing, the roof tiling. So it was a really good crew. He had so much knowledge and experience. I remember a young project manager at the time pulled me aside and said, "Don't listen to Tony, he's just a builder's labourer." And I thought then, because I was a 25-year-old, I'd just come back from overseas, and I thought then, you're just missing the whole point. You're not utilising this gentleman's knowledge to help you build this building in a better, safer and more productive way. And I think a lot of the time workers, the knowledge, the skill and the experience that they bring to the table is so often overlooked and left waiting outside the door. And it's a real shame.
And it's not just necessarily about productivity or making best use of your workers' knowledge and skills, but what does the evidence show us about workplaces that don't do consultation?
There's been a lot of academic papers, but I mean, in a 30-word summary, in the mining industry, there were 10 major factors of all these incidents and major fatalities. and it was done in America or USA, Europe, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And amongst those 10 top or most common features of all these disasters, consultation was about number 3 in each country. So the failure to consult with workers, the failure to pass on the information, the failure to utilise the miners or the hands-on miners' knowledge about what was going on, that was one of the in every country, in the top 3 of all these 10 factors. And it was quite telling to read and quite disturbing when you think that happened, back in the 80s and 90s and early noughties, and we still are often falling into the same trap of leaving the knowledge, skill and experience of the workforce, again, outside the door rather than inviting it in to get a better way to do the work.
That's it. Great. So we've talked a bit about the importance of consultation, the fact that good consultation leads to better outcomes, but in fact the failure to consult can often lead to, incidents. And indeed sites that don't do consultation will have more incidents, more serious incidents. What do employers actually have to consult on though? What should they, and when should they be? Well, we've already talked a bit about when they should be doing it, but what should they be consulting on?
Well, Section 35 of the OHS Act, I'm not going to read it out to people because it'll send you to sleep, but it gives a very in-depth, comprehensive and detailed list of issues which the employer must consult with. And it really is everything. Anything to do with occupational health and safety, the employer must consult with both the OHS reps, if there is one, and the individual employees, if there's not one. And if there's both, then they still have to do that with the OHS reps. So it can range from doing a simple risk assessment to what control methods you're putting in to control the identified hazards, which again should be done in consultation with the workforce. It involves, whether you have adequate facilities at the workplace. It even involves setting up an OHS committee and who's on that committee. So there's a whole range of things. But yeah, Section 35 makes it very, very clear about what they have to consult on. And in a nutshell, it's everything and anything to do with occupational health and safety, which will affect any members of that particular group who are working in that particular place of work.
Sure. So it's pretty broad. Like, it's not just the obvious falls from height or trip hazards. It's like the design of work. If that's going to cause people stress, anxiety, it can be the design of work. It can be all manner of. It just has to have that nexus, that argument. How does it affect someone's health or safety in the workplace? In the workplace.
So if you're, for example, a teacher, how is that classroom designed? So if there is violence in that classroom, how is that teacher somehow either can get out or can get help? In, for example, a hospital or a nursing home, are the beds or are the wards designed so nurses and cleaning staff and whoever is using that as a workplace, they're not being injured or they're not being, confronted with some type of violence or, stress and strains of moving patients and lifting beds. Anything, like you said, the nexus is anything which can affect those workers in that particular workplace. And that's often the thing we also miss about. There's a lot of talk about safety in design, but if you talk to, and I've spoken to a lot of our nursing comrades in the ANMF and teachers, very rarely do they get the opportunity to have input into the design of the classrooms or the design of the school or the design of the new wing of the hospital being built. It's only after the effect, and often can be too late. So you're to the nursing fraternity, you're putting on band-aids on a really severe wound, basically.
What's reasonably practicable is completely different before the ground's been started to be dug versus presented a finished building.
And you're always best to get in before the ground's dug, so they're digging in the right part of the ground, basically.
And I know it's a bit off track for today, but there are obligations on designers of buildings and whatnot to consult as well, which is not always particularly well done.
No.
Okay, fantastic. I suppose the final question I have for you before we open it to our audience is, what if the employer doesn't want to consult? So if you don't like it, leave, or if it's too hot, get out the kitchen.
That's a really good question and a really difficult one to answer. I mean, the obvious answer is to get all your other work friends or colleagues around you and go to the employer. And there is a provision in the Act to say we want to elect an OHS representative and we want to establish an OHS committee. So that committee can actually help with that kind of first step, or the OHS rep can certainly help with that first step in consultation. If the employer still refuses, the Act gives any worker the right to contact WorkSafe, the state OHS regulator, to then request, put in a service request for a WorkSafe inspector to visit the workplace. And they can also ring up anonymously if they so wish, the 1-800 line for WorkSafe, and you can make a complaint that my employer is refusing to consult, he or she is therefore in breach of the OHS legislation. Then WorkSafe would have to come down and investigate that. So that's one way. The other way, of course, is to ring up your union and to say, please, I'm a member of your union, whatever union it is, can we please have someone to come down and sort through this issue, because we don't feel safe and we need some assistance. And that's what the union's for. That's what we're for. We're there to help our members. Trades Hall are there to help people who, first find out what union they should be in. But certainly there's nothing better than having a collective approach to get the best outcome. And it's been proven time and time again. Again, lots of academic evidence. The safest workplaces are union workplaces, because collectively you can get far greater and better OHS outcomes than if you act alone as an individual.
Fantastic. Thank you.